So today we're going to dive into one of history's most incredible turnaround stories. It's all about Joseph's leadership during a devastating 7-year famine. Now, it's an amazing story of foresight and administration, but wow, it also came with some pretty profound consequences. Let's break down how this all went down.
It's a question that feels both ancient and somehow incredibly modern. When all the systems that we rely on just completely break down, what does it actually take to lead people through that kind of crisis? Well, that's exactly the challenge Joseph was up against.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll look at it in 5 parts. First, the absolutely insane scale of this crisis. Then we'll get into Joseph's radical plan to fix it. We'll see how Egypt became the world's only source of food, unpack the true cost of that survival, and finally, look at the famine's deeper purpose according to the text.
Okay, so first things first, we really need to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this disaster. This wasn't just, a bad harvest or some local drought. We're talking about a cataclysm that was threatening to unravel the entire ancient world.
This thing was just relentless, and it was everywhere. The original text says it was sore in all lands. This was a regional disaster that could have wiped out entire civilizations. There was simply nowhere to run, nowhere to hide.
And really, this one line from the text just nails it. Just try to picture it. A whole world plunged into starvation, but with one single exception: Egypt. Because of a divinely inspired heads-up, it became this little island of survival in a huge sea of desperation. So how on earth did Egypt pull this off? It's the million-dollar question, right? Well, it all came down to one man with a clear 2-part strategy that was as simple as it was, frankly, revolutionary.
I mean, the discipline here is just incredible. For 7 straight years, when food was abundant, Joseph mandated that a full 20% of the nation's entire harvest be collected. And, this is crucial, it wasn't just stored locally. It was all centralized in state-controlled granaries. Think about what that takes. It requires immense administrative power and total buy-in from the entire nation.
And this was the absolute key to making it all work. Pharaoh gave Joseph total, absolute authority. When the famine finally hit and people were crying out for food, the command from the top was simple: go to Joseph. He wasn't just some advisor. He literally held the nation's survival in his hands.
So because this plan was executed so flawlessly, Egypt's place in the world just completely transformed, literally overnight. It went from being one powerful kingdom among many to being the single most important nation on the entire planet.
And the scale of this is just staggering. We're not just talking about feeding Egyptians here. The source goes out of its way to emphasize that people from all countries were making the journey to Egypt to buy grain. Joseph became the preserver of life, not just for one nation, but for pretty much the entire known world. Okay, but here's the thing. Survival came at a monumental cost. And this is where the story takes this really fascinating, kind of complex turn. The plan worked, yes, but it fundamentally and forever reshaped Egyptian society. What you're seeing here is the systematic stripping of an entire society, piece by piece. As the famine just dragged on, people's assets were completely depleted. First went all their money. When that ran out, they traded their livestock, their future livelihood. Then came their last, most precious asset, their land. And finally, with absolutely nothing left, they sold their very freedom, becoming servants to Pharaoh just to survive.
And what is just wild is the reaction you see in the text. There's no record of a rebellion, no outrage. Instead, the people actually express gratitude. "You have saved our lives," they say, as they accept their new reality as servants of the state. It really just highlights the brutal choice they were facing: servitude with life or freedom with death.
So this all leads to a brand new law for the entire land. From then on, the people would work the fields that now belonged to Pharaoh, and they got to keep 80% of the harvest for themselves. The other 20%, that became a permanent tax to the crown. In one fell swoop, state power was completely consolidated, but it also ensured the population could actually sustain itself and move forward.
But, the story doesn't just stop there with the economics of it all. The source material suggests this wasn't just about survival. This entire crisis is framed as having a much deeper a theological purpose. So from that perspective, the big idea here is something called wise stewardship. Joseph's incredible administrative talent isn't just seen as him being a clever guy. It's portrayed as a divine gift, a practical skill given by God for one very specific purpose, to preserve life and move a much larger plan forward. And this is where you get this really powerful theological parallel. Joseph, the man who saves people by handing out physical bread, is seen as a foreshadowing of Christ, who offers to save humanity as the spiritual bread of life. It's this powerful contrast. One saves the body, the other saves the soul. And that, of course, leaves us with a huge question to think about. The story of Joseph really forces us to ask, is a crisis just a random, terrible disaster? Or can it sometimes be a stage, carefully setting the scene for a much greater design to unfold? It's a question about perspective, about faith, and about how we manage to find meaning right in the middle of chaos.